Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers.
Right? No judging. No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby, tell them. Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. I'm Justin Fox, joined by Hessie Jones. Hessie, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Justin.
Awesome. So I'll give a quick little intro. So you're an author, how do I even say that? Strategist, investor, and data privacy practitioner, advocating for human-centered AI education and the ethical distribution of AI in this era of transformation. As an investor, you seek to power the underestimated founder through capital and connectivity. There, say that 10 times fast, right?
Yeah, it's a nice elevator pitch, isn't it?
There you go. So I guess we'll jump right into it. Obviously we've talked a few times, connected on LinkedIn. I see sort of what you're up to. Why don't you tell us what you're up to right now, and maybe sort of what brought you to there, or where do you want to begin? How do we begin this? I always joke, should we begin at like birth, or like where does the story start?
Well, I could tell you what I'm doing now, and maybe it'll kind of make sense in terms of where I began.
Yeah.
But right now I am working at Altitude Accelerators. So
right.
We are an accelerator here in Brampton near Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And we focus on, I would say, hard tech or deep tech or clean tech. We are industry agnostic. So one of the reasons I came here was because I've actually worked in startup for like 10, 12 years of my life. And I was always on the other side. But here and there, I've actually been like a co-founder in many different respects, and worked for at least 6, 7 different startups. So I understand what it's like to be on the other side. And this is, I think, one of the ways I can give back. But at the same time, I am an investor. So it's also a way to see some exciting startups and to look for potential deal flow.
Right.
So that's what I'm doing now. But I also juggle a few things because we are launching an investment, a small business investment company. It's not necessarily a VC, but it's a different way of investing. So I'm not going to tell you all about that right now, just because we're still ironing out the kinks. But my real passion, and which I have been doing in a few startups beforehand, was actually privacy. Data privacy.
Okay.
And what I call like the AI ethics and I guess the equal distribution of AI, and that comes in many forms. But one of the reasons I actually arrived here was because I was a marketer, and so I came from the data analytics side of the business. I was in data marketing for many, many years. So I kind of understand how profiles have been built through like on the internet, as well as through transactional files in banking, as well as loyalty programs. So I understand how people are profiled, and how over time it's become easier and easier to contextualize who an individual is on the web by search, by what they say, and being able to aggregate all these forms together. So eventually I realized that as much as I was a purveyor of, hey, you got to know who your customer is,
right,
and let's marry transactional data with social data, I realized that we're crossing a really dangerous line to a point that I started to realize we don't have the right to I guess, assume who an individual is because of what they say and who they are on the internet, and to be able to make those assumptions by marrying them with business data so that we could target them in a way that may be uncomfortable for the individual. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, because I realized data privacy is a big thing. And a lot of the tech companies have been flying under the radar for many years, and they have no right to be able to use the information that they have to inform or actually create a more profitable business model for themselves.
Right.
We're seeing it all over the place with ChatGPT. I mean, the issue with OpenAI and all those tools that will continue to iterate based on what people are feeding it and learn from the information and continue to perpetuate the bias problems that we see today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just talking with someone yesterday about ChatGPT. Well, not just about ChatGPT, but about he mentioned that I think the human knowledge is accelerating at such a rapid pace. I forget the exact number. So those watching, they probably can watch yesterday or whatever the previous episode, where I think he said like now it's doubling every 3 months. So like at a crazy rate of change, right? The human knowledge is doubling every 3 months, and it's expected to get to almost doubling every week. And I'm sure that just obviously continues,
Absolutely.
to a point where it's just, doubling at such a rate of pace that, is uncontrollable. And the idea of what does that lead to? And you're talking about, privacy and the individual privacy and versus the profits of the organization or the corporations, right? So where do you see, I guess, and I was looking at your bio a little bit, you've obviously worked with a number of AI startups, not just, very recently, but like in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? So you've seen maybe the evolution of what that maybe looks like. Now you're saying you've kind of had, I don't know about an aha, like let's start to pull back a little bit, but where do you see that going, or what are you working on to kind of curtail, if you will, or to protect the privacy of the individual? Like what are some of the things that are being done, not necessarily by you specifically, but in general? Like where do you see that going?
Well, I've been part of this, I guess, AI ethics community for at least 6, 7 years.
Right.
And I started talking to people who were concerned about the number of missteps some of these models have taken, and especially when they're open source, right? It's great from a transparency perspective, but even ChatGPT to some extent, there's a close part of it, like there's a secret sauce there. I mean, Microsoft and OpenAI aren't going to divulge like how a lot of this stuff was built, but I think that the other part of it is, as much as there is a profit motive, there's so many downsides that are happening right now just in public. It's just like we're at a stage where everybody's talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence. We're not there yet. We still haven't fixed narrow intelligence, and that's exactly what ChatGPT is at a grander scale.
Mm-hmm.
It's still it's stealing all the information that is comprised in these databases are scraped.
Right, they're feeding it from somewhere, basically, right?
From somewhere, and they're coming from data that was breached, data that was stolen from data brokers, data that was sold and resold, and also like they're finding it's data that is owned by people, like Shutterstock.
So like copyright sort of infringement.
Exactly, there is a copyright infringement. So if you think about if you were a designer, and my daughter told me this because she works in an agency, and she hates this idea of Lensa as stable diffusion, where people have had, years of experience in developing their craft, and then they're putting their stuff out there, and now it's being used as a variable in a model
like
to
training,
create new outputs, which is very disconcerting, because at some point in time, it not only it puts people out of work, it makes it easy for you and me who have never really had the ability to be an artist or to create that craft, to do it easily just by the flick of a wrist, right? And so that to me it is an issue. I think in a lot of ways it's great from a productivity perspective, but we have to be careful about how productive we want to be without actually encroaching on the lives of people, especially if you're a writer, if you're an artist, if you are a reporter, And if you are trying to create some kind of integrity when it comes to the news out there, there's going to be a lot more fake news. A friend of mine who works with me in privacy said, Hessie, we can get rid and remediate, privacy information in these large language models. He goes, we should use synthetic data. I said, great. Let's use synthetic data and create more fake news. So we don't even know what's real anymore.
Right.
I said, so one problem creates another, right? As much as
Right.
you want to protect people, now we don't know the difference between what's real and what's fake. So how is that going to help society?
It's interesting that so it's funny when we started. I was thinking more privacy on when I interact with ChatGPT, my privacy as the user, which is I think what most people would think of the concern on privacy. You're
Right.
also stating, which I guess I hadn't really thought too much about, is the fact that they are, as you said, scraping the intent, the entire internet. I forget the numbers, but like 3 to 4 with ChatGPT, 3 to ChatGPT 4, like is exponentially more information has been fed into it, right? And then I mean, who knows where that goes? It was like 4 trillion or some crazy number, right, of information that's been fed into it. And so that information is coming from somewhere. And you're saying that's the privacy breach, is that where it's coming from, and the fact that it is coming from, other people's creations, whether it be art or written or whatever that is, and it's using that to inform its output, right? And so that's the issue there. Do you see? Sorry, go ahead. Is that?
I just want to add to that because the privacy layer now it's also it's not even the trained data anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it is the trained when it gets iterated, but there are people that are using it for work. So imagine being able, and I was going to do this the other day, but I decided I'm not going to do that, because imagine taking meeting notes, right? And you want it to summarize. Summary is a huge component of productivity, right? And you can easily summarize by taking a full transcript and putting in ChatGPT and just say, summarize this for me. And then you could say, add another prompt and say, now put it in bullet form, or cut it down so that it's 750 words. It is training on that data, and that data is confidential data to your company. So if your company, especially if it's like for us, it's startups. So a lot of it is IP related,
proprietary IP, yeah.
Exactly.
Intellectual property, yeah.
Exactly. So let's say privacy is one thing, confidentiality is another, because now there's a liability component. And so you can, if you leave it open to the public and you say, hey, anybody can try to use it, of course they're going to use it. And they don't know.
I used it today. I'm not going to lie, but yes.
Yeah.
I created a script for a video and then fed the script into another AI, and it basically created an automated video. But yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, so are you going to tell the average user, be wary of the information that you're inputting? Because what they've also found is that they made a mistake. I think it was last Monday. People started looking at their history of the prompts that they were sending, and suddenly somebody else's prompt and output showed up on their own account.
Oh, so those are like a crossover or some sort of
So can you imagine if you, and they said, oh, it was only a limited number of accounts, but imagine you being able to see somebody else's input. Right. I mean, that itself is a liability, because now you're exposing the issues with that account. But on top of that, now you know that whether or not some of the information that's being fed is proprietary, right? It opens up a can of worms on many levels.
Yeah, so. No, it's interesting. So I mean, it's almost learning now from, it's been fed obviously, but then it's learning from the information that's being inputted by the users. So I've heard too that, you talked about sort of the fake news part of sort of, what you call it, synthetic data being kind of fed in, and then who knows what the real answer is. I saw a video, or I don't know, I watch a lot of things, but where somebody was talking about how the output was almost, I wouldn't say a lie necessarily, but like marginally incorrect, but in a way that made the entire point incorrect or falsified, if you will, right? Which obviously, if it's kind of just pushing information and not, really, I guess, what would be the, sort of validating the sources or kind of,
It doesn't do that.
it doesn't do any of that, right? So it's interesting that it's now like just taking our inputs and creating its own kind of thought process on things.
Yeah.
So how let's put on our Nostradamus, the crystal ball. Like, what do you see, like, from a policy and sort of a, you mentioned the ethics type of side of things. What do you see being a solution to this problem, or like what is being discussed? Maybe there is no definitive solution, but what's being discussed, and what are some of the ideas out there that people can, maybe if it's advice to individuals what to do or not to do, or what organizations can do or not do, or even just what AI companies are looking at as far as what they're thinking as far as ethics, because obviously it's a very slippery slope, as we I think the other person mentioned the other day, like 90 days ago this didn't exist, right? Or I mean, it existed, but like ChatGPT and this kind of like public entity of it or version of it didn't exist up until call it 3 to 6 months ago, right? And it's iterating at such a pace. So like where are the ethics in that, or where do you see things going?
So I saw this post today. Do you know Timnit Gebru? She was former Google. She was also fired by Google. She was a data scientist, and because she was the one that called out a lot of the bias problems with the data that was being released by Google. And
that's another thing, the bias of it, right? Because if it's coming from one specific angle, right, it's going to have that skew, right?
Yeah. And that's the issue, is that I don't think you'll ever remove the bias, because humans are biased. There's no such thing as an unbiased human, right? And you might as well be a robot who has never had any kind of cultural upbringing,
or any direction. I think our generation is sort of trying to balk the bias a little bit, and maybe going the other way, but it is what it is sometimes, right?
But there is I saw this morning, there is an open letter calling on all AI labs to actually pause for at least 6 months to actually take a look at what's happening, to see if there's a way they can remediate this. A fact is that Microsoft had invested hundreds of millions of dollars into this. I don't know the exact amount. I know it was a lot.
I think it was like billions, wasn't it? Like 12 billion.
Billions.
Yeah, lots.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
So
it's anything over $1 million or $2 million is a lot.
It's a lot. But they removed their ethics team, and so they said, really? Well, it actually came with layoffs, but there are 11 people in that ethics team. So don't tell me that was a significant. I mean, they got rid of everybody.
Right.
So from anybody, from a logical standpoint, if something internally impedes your profit goal as an organization, are you going to get rid of it? Of course, it compromises your objective. So you need to make sure, and this is probably one of the reasons why Timnit was let go from Google, because
how do you spell her name for those watching? What's her name?
Timnit.
Timnit. Okay.
Right, and she is the founder of DARE, which is the Distributed AI Research Institute.
Timnit Gebru. Gebru? Gebru?
Gebru, yes.
Yeah. I just looked it up.
But she's a huge, she and Margaret Mitchell, who now works at Hugging Face, they're huge proponents of really understanding what's going on with the data and models before you actually release them into the wild. And when ChatGPT was released, of course, they can't do much with what they have until they have actual scale of use cases. And that's why you release it into the public. So now you've created millions upon millions of use cases every given minute, right? But with that comes, okay, we're going to have problems. So let's figure out like what those problems are going to be. And it's up to the company to not only be able to flag them, have people internally say, hey, this is wrong, or this is bias, or this is this, but also work retroactively to try to fix, instances of those types of outcomes. if they have the amount of money that they have to try to improve a system like this for the benefit of humanity, then they should do some kind of reverse modeling to try to minimize the chances of those harms actually coming through as well. I mean, that's their role. They have the money to
as the organization, yeah, especially on Microsoft that has that kind of
absolutely
funding to. So it's interesting you said they laid off all of their ethics team, which is basically countered everything we're talking about here, right? Which
yep.
you know, and not to say that everyone knows all the answers. Obviously, it's an ever evolving, you know, sort of thing. What I mean, just sort of back to my previous question, what are some of the things that people are kind of looking at as far as, you know, implementing ethics teams, having that oversight, right? These are some of the things. What are some of the worries or concerns that the average person isn't thinking about that, you know, 6-12 months from now might happen? Are there any like major kind of red flags that are happening, or is it an unknown? It's sort of the yeah. You don't know what you don't know kind of thing, you know, the unknown of the unknown.
Well, I think people are trying it, and they're trying to do little things like and this is when I talk about fake news, like it's almost like you could be it in a lot of ways. It'll tell you the wrong thing, but you don't know, so it could be this biggest bullshitter you know, out there. So I'll give you an example, because a friend of mine just posted something like he wanted ChatGPT to tell him whether or not the term underrepresented could be changed into something called the visible majority, right? I've heard that term many times. So here's the reality. Visible majority is not a known term. Visible minority is, because we have huge databases and instances of it being used. So the reply, I'm going to read this, that came from ChatGPT. I'm sorry, I cannot fulfill that request. The term visible majority is not commonly used or recognized as a replacement for underrepresented groups. In fact, it could be inappropriate or even offensive, as it implies that certain groups are superior or more visible than others. It's important to use language that is inclusive, respectful, and recognizes the diversity of all individuals and groups. Like, come on, seriously, really? So from that perspective, like a friend of mine said, you know, over time, you start to look at these responses. That does not sound like a human would have said that, right? That sounds like a generated output that came from a computer. You could tell, like, this is the visible majority. Like, they wouldn't, a person would not say those things to somebody else. Oh, it sounds like it's.
Does it almost sound like legalese, or sort of like you know, like a sort
it just
of
doesn't sound like a human,
right?
Because it says underrepresented groups is commonly used term that acknowledges certain groups may not be fully represented. Like, that's a definition, right?
Right.
It is important to focus on addressing the systemic barriers and biases that contribute to this inequality. You know, that all that you could actually find in many posts out there. So it's a matter of saying, it's taking things that already exist as opposed to the nuance of actually being enlightened and creating new concepts and being able to say things in a way that's empathetic. There's no such thing as a computer that can do that right now, because all it's doing is looking for patterns.
It's connecting the existing dots, not necessarily creating
it can't make implications
pathways.
for the future yet.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
well, the key word yet. Hopefully, that is maybe the line that people are worried. Maybe it does cross, where if it can start to create inferences from, or you know, kind of create its own thought process from, you're here now, it ends up over here, rather than just connecting the existing dots. Like, is that now it's sentient and it can create its own thought process?
That's your general Just
Is
that's
is that
general intelligence.
is
Yeah.
that the, what did you call it?
AGI.
AGI? This is the first time I've
Yeah.
heard of it. So
Yeah.
artificial general
General
intelligence. Okay.
Right
So
now we're in ANI, which is artificial narrow intelligence, which
narrow.
means it's learning from the data that's already there. And
It's more an
AGI,
extension of machine learning, right? It's kind of just the iteration of, yeah.
yeah, it's part of machine learning. It's just learning at a faster rate. That's
Right.
it. That's it. But it's not being able to extrapolate the information to a point that you're now a thought leader, you know.
Right.
It's
right.
not,
It's not going to come up with new ideas and concepts out of thin air or
no.
yeah. Okay.
It'll do what this thing did. See, he's asking for its opinion, which you can't really do. It doesn't
Right.
have an opinion. It's
Yeah.
only going to cobble together things that it knows about the terms that it's being fed.
It's like me asking for the NCAA March Madness who they think is going to win, and it was unable to provide with
Yeah.
betting picks.
Exactly.
Although then I started saying things like, well, which team has won more, or which team has higher probability, and then it eventually which team sells more tickets, whatever, and it gave a few answers, and you can infer from that. As a human, I can take that knowledge and use what I want, but it was unwilling to. Maybe I think that's part of its coding to provide sports picks, but anyways,
any kind of betting, any kind of which stock price was going to happen when the Bitcoin.
Well, that's the other side, right? Yeah, it's not gonna provide you. No,
and thank God. Otherwise, we'd all be rich and we'd probably market.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, okay, so let's sort of swing the other side. Good luck. Obviously, I think I'd love to hear when you do roll out the new organization. Maybe we could do this again and talk about that. But why don't we touch base on the startups? Obviously, AI is a huge part of what's happening in startups. It's probably one of the pillars. Blockchain, AI, those might be the two. There's obviously others that are from a technological kind of revolution that are happening. You mentioned sorry, I can't even speak. Altitude accelerators. How is that going? You mentioned, I think it was the Brampton Angel Network. I think was it
Brampton Angels.
Angels. Okay, yeah. So a couple of things. What's it like? Obviously as an entrepreneur, and kind of shifting again, as an entrepreneur, you went sort of from in the trenches, if you will, to now a part of an accelerator working with entrepreneurs and as an investor. What's that shift been like for you and sort of that process? How has that been? I mean, I'm sure it's been, as with anything, ups and downs and a bumpy road, but how has that been? I don't know. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there.
So I went from startup to investor. I think the reason I did that was because I knew at some point in my life I probably wanted to give that back a little bit.
Right.
And if I got into a position where I could do that, I would. And which is the reason why I went to Matter Ventures, and which is the reason why we're starting what we're starting now.
Right.
It's now being able, because you work in industry for such a long time, you kind of understand, what are the specific industries that are starting to take hold, and always trying to find really cool startups and figuring out who's fundable, who's developing something really cool and interesting. But also, I think for me, it's not actually looking for that unicorn anymore, because from my perspective, we have way too many problems in this world that it's really not finding like that cool social network that somebody wants to develop, or that new gaming, system. It's about climate change. It's about the issues that we're seeing when it comes to diversity problems, when it comes to the electrical grid and trying to electrify our vehicles and our homes and everything, while we're fighting Mother Nature. And so I'm thinking, if and I keep saying this to my kids, I said, you're you're young enough now that there's going to be so much employment. If you want to work in environmental, you'll have a job. If you want to try to get to space, you'll have a job. I said, because we are trying to tackle some of the most significant problems that we've ever encountered in this world. And now is the time to actually, put dollars into those things that matter for humanity.
Right.
So yes, there's a market for it, but that's because if we don't do anything, then we're all screwed, right? And so we have to be mindful of the innovation that we're investing in, and understand that this is almost like a Noah's Ark moment. Everybody talks about the fact that we're in a climate crisis, and we are now at a moment where we can't reverse course. So can we mitigate it? Can we try to minimize the chance of our us heating this world at 1 degree? Can we push that off till later? We can only do that. We can only do that if we actually work collectively to try to change our systems and put money where it's needed. So
it's interesting that not specific to specific, I guess, societal goods, but it's interesting you said, rather than having that one unicorn that has that one sort of, social network or whatever it is, looking at maybe a multitude of organizations that are tackling, very maybe niche type problems, whether it's climate, whether it's, whatever that might be. We talked about, privacy and ethics or different things that are being tackled by smaller, maybe more focused, specific organizations, rather than one giant organization that's expected to kind of be the savior for all, right? It's kind of, let's all be a part of the solution, right, as a society, and everyone contributes to that, and we kind of put all of our efforts not into one egg, but into 1,000 eggs, right?
There's a reason why ESG is a thing now, right? And why there are a lot more impact funds that are investing in people and companies that are providing alternatives to materials that people can consume without them hurting the planet, and alternative materials for sugar or leather. For example, those are the kinds of companies that we're seeing at Altitude Accelerator. Medicare, another one, right? Medicare, how do we fix our healthcare system?
Right.
With the long wait times, how to innovate for doctors and nurses where we have scarce resources, long wait times, a system that's just archaic in its approach to managing data.
Right.
So there's so many problems that we need to fix, and we can't do it. We can't do it without any kind of resource or visibility towards the things that we need to focus on.
If you had a magic wand, I just was thinking, what would be sort of the one thing that you think, is sort of priority number one? I mean, you've talked about a few of them, but like more of a niche thing. Broader ESG, the climate we talked about. What would you think is something that is a pressing matter right now? Not to throw you on the spot. I have a couple ideas as well.
Okay. Like I think the one thing that I'm starting to realize is that there's going to be a huge migration problem in the future when certain areas of the globe heat up more than others. There are going to be swaths of populations moving to different areas of the globe, and that's going to mean that there's going to be resources that are going to be needed to help those people migrate, right? It's not even a technology thing. It's countries being open to be able to deal with what happens when New Jersey falls off the map because it ends up drowning in the Atlantic Ocean. Same thing with Venice, right? We're going to have so much flooding. We're going to have huge dry spots in California. And we're going to have deserts in many places.
Right.
what are we going to do with all those people that are going to be homeless? We got to think that, to me, though, that is the crisis that we have to plan for, and nobody's planning for it, right? Nobody is thinking about what's
sort of
gonna
mass
happen to
shifts in
them.
population density.
It's yeah, and it's not, it's so it's going to affect our each economy. It's going to affect jobs. It's going to affect infrastructure. So what are the things that are going to be impacted in order to accommodate this migration of people from one geography to another? And that hasn't been thought about, because that's going to take a lot more than just technology.
Yeah,
So,
no, definitely. The one thing I always think about is water, or like, scarcity or the availability of water,
oh,
right?
absolutely.
You mentioned, California, turning into arguably a desert. It's already, every what is
Yeah.
it, fall or spring, I guess spring maybe.
Colorado
It's
River.
like on fire all the time, right? And yeah, there's the rivers dried up, and so, and then you figure, obviously for humanity to survive, there needs to be, that is the term, potable, drinkable,
Yeah,
water, right? Like
well,
usable water,
absolutely.
right? That's
They
accessible, right? So
they in the past, like, I mean, the hunters and gatherers and like the nomads of the past, where they end up setting camp and living
yeah,
is around water,
yeah,
right?
on the
They
edge of
had
water,
to.
right?
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
exactly what's going to happen. And then when you have, not only is it less water, but even drinkable water,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The
Usable, drinkable.
desalination,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
a huge problem. I don't
Exactly.
know if we've solved for that right now. So, I worry about my kids. I worry less about me, but I worry about the future generations and whether or not they're going to take I wouldn't say take it seriously. I think we have to take it seriously, not only for us, but for them and for others. But whether or not they're going to have the necessary tools to be able to do this, because shame on us and shame on, the generation before us that did the things that we did. We didn't have enough foresight, but also when we did nothing about it.
Right. Interesting. Well, I don't, I've got about 50 different directions I could probably go there, but I figure maybe we'll have a round two where we can discuss
Sure.
maybe what you're doing at Altitude Accelerator. I feel like I'm tongue tied today. I can't get the words out of my mouth.
Okay.
And then potentially a new venture. So where can people find you? Obviously LinkedIn. Where else?
I would say Twitter, but I'm not
Twitter?
there.
You're not there anymore? Okay.
I am, but I'm not
as active.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. If they want to find me. I do have hessiejones.com that I do check once in a while.
Okay.
But
do you write a blog there? Do you have sort of content?
No, not anymore. But they
No?
also can find me on Forbes. I do write an article on Forbes, so they just have to search Hessie Jones on Google.
Okay.
And they should be able to see all my articles.
Keep an eye out for what you're up to and what's cool. Well, I appreciate you joining me. Yeah, it's been great. Good luck with the new venture. When is that? What's the timeline there for that?
EBA
to
this
be
year?
To 20, hopefully 2023. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Report back in on December 31st. Well, no, I'm just kidding. That's your deadline. You got to report back to us, and hopefully it's done by then.
Absolutely.
I'm kidding. Well, enjoy your afternoon. Appreciate the time. Everyone else, Justin Fox, Hessie Jones, One Take powered by backers. I'll see you guys again very soon. Hey there, welcome to One Take powered by backers.
Right? No judging. No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby.